All right, still in the shop. I've been putting together all of my weapon light comparison videos and footage. I had to wait for a new light meter to come with a proper calibration test and verification. So I'm gonna have to redo a lot of that video. But while I was out here, I figured a lot of people are asking about the new X300 Turbo and how it compares to the X300u and the Modlite PL350 options, which would be the OKW and the Plh V2 are the two that I have. I believe those are the only ones that are sold in the slim line. I'm not sure. They are the two that I have. They're also the two most popular Modlite heads, so that's what I'll be comparing today. So I have here a one of the new X300 Turbo. Okay, I also have my PL350. This one has the Plh V2 head, and then I have my my old OKW head as well, and on the old Modlite prototype handheld product. So I've got the two Modlite heads for the PL350, and then I also have the two Surefire weapon lights. Okay, so I'm going to start with the X300u, the Surefire X300u. This is the 1000 lumen version. Okay, so bear with me here. Okay, and this is at about 5 yards, I think. It's not very far away. But this is just a real basic beam comparison in low light. Turn this off real quick. Okay. So first we have the X300u. It's basically all spill, no real hot spot to speak of. But it does a real good job of illuminating the room. But what it doesn't have is a lot of photonic barrier, penetrating, face melting, eye searing candela. And anybody who knows me knows that I'm a shameless whore for candela. So that's what that looks like. That's the X300u. Next, we have the PL350 with the Plh V2 head, and you can see that has a damn bright hot spot in the center and a nice wide flood that does a very good job of filling the whole space with light. Okay. Then we have the OKW, which again has a very hot spot. This one's even hotter than the Plh V2. And now the camera doesn't really do justice to the difference between the Plh V2 and the OKW. It does tend to kind of even out the light output, but the Plh V2 definitely has a stronger spill. It's a little bit wider, but I wouldn't say it's significantly wider than the OKW. It's just brighter. Okay, so there's your OKW, and there's your Plh V2. OKW is a little bit tighter, a little bit less output on the OKW when it comes to spill, a little bit more on the Plh V2 side. But it's maybe a 15% differential, okay? Now keep in mind, we're talking about close range home defense distances. We're not talking about long distance, patrol rifle type engagements at, 100, 150 yards, that kind of stuff. At that, when you get to that point, the OKW does tend to pull away a little bit, okay? And now we have the X300 Turbo. And as you can see, the X300 Turbo is significantly better, as it should be, than the X300U. There's the X300U and the X300 Turbo. When the turbo is on, you barely even notice that there's another light on, honestly. It's very difficult to tell. Compare it to the OKW, and you'll see the hotspot output is almost identical between the two. The turbo has a bit of almost like a penumbra around the hotspot that gives I would say even a little bit more peripheral information about the target. If you look at the OKW versus the Surefire Turbo, the Turbo does have a little bit more of a bright kind of a stepped spill around the hotspot, but they're both very, very heavy hitters. And then you compare the Turbo to the PLH V2, and the PLH V2 does have a little bit more girth to its hotspot. That's what I would call it. The actual output itself, the actual hotspot itself, I would say they're both just as hot, just as bright as each other. The PLH V2 just edges it out in the size of the hotspot. I would say from an output standpoint, these are all within margin. These are all within the margin of error. They're all going to push through any sort of photonic barrier that you're going to be dealing with within handgun ranges. I'm talking about windshields, car exhaust, fog, smoke, dirty windows on a house, that kind of stuff. They're gonna burn right through it. OKW, same way. These give you a little bit more of the peripheral spill than you would get with an OKW, and for a handgun light, I do prefer that. Just because the primary use of a handgun is for defense in areas that you might not be familiar with. You know, like a dark parking lot or stuff like that. Being able to have that peripheral spill, I think, is more of a benefit on a handgun than having a pure hot spot with the reduced peripheral spill. So PLH V2, X300 Turbo. Between these two, I would give the slightest edge to the PLH V2. Very, very slight, but I do believe that this is the better output. But I think it's within margin of error, and I think between these two, I think light output is not going to be the thing that determines which of these lights you choose. These lights are going to be chosen based on your preference for switches and holster compatibility. I think those are the two biggest things that are going to determine. Personally, for me, I prefer the controls. I prefer the simplicity of the switches on the PL350. I know some people have had issues with theirs. I haven't had any of those issues. I just like the way that the controls work better on the PL350 than the X300. I don't like that the switches on the Turbo are pretty much exactly the same as the switches on the Ultra, and I think they could have improved the feel of those a little bit better. I think if they had improved the switches on the on the X300 Turbo, it would be very easy for me to swap to the Turbo from the PL350. But for me, I prioritize those switches on the PL350, and that's how I see it. So from an output standpoint, if you have an X300 Ultra and you like Surefire switches, I can't see a reason not to choose the Turbo as your next light, because it hits hard, and if you like Surefire switches, it's got Surefire switches. But that's what you're looking at. We've got, there's a PL350, and that, my friends, is the lowest height over bore you're ever going to see on a Glock. Oh yeah. But that's your PL350. That's your X300 Turbo. those are your different outputs. You decide which one you like better, I guess. Hope that helps.